really awakening to the dreamlike nature of our reality, really awakening to the dreamlike nature of our reality, really awakening to the dreamlike nature of our reality. What is really going on with regards to our humanity or lack thereof, and specifically focusing on understanding the suffering that we are seeing in the world, the insanity really that is playing out right before us. What can we do, most importantly, about it? Okay, so what is going on Earth with us as humans? Okay, so what is going on Earth with us as humans? Okay, so what is going on Earth with us as humans?
We are in the middle of a collective psychosis of epic proportions, and it's so pervasive that it's not even that much of a part of our planetary conversation. And that's an expression of the depth of the madness that has overtaken our species. And it's nothing new. I'm just a translator for, so many of these traditions, spiritual traditions are saying this. Just as a modern person, I'm translating it into a psychological sort of metaphor or idiom. The origin, the source of the madness that's playing out in our world through the greater body politic is the psyche. It's so unbelievably obvious, but yet from the consensus reality point of view, what I'm saying just seems like so out there and so radical. What I'm saying just seems like so out there and so radical. What I'm saying just seems like so out there and so radical. But it's so, it's just so clear. So what I'm basically saying is that there's an actual disease in the collective unconscious, but encoded in this disease, it's actually medicine. It's actually helping us to wake up. But encoded in this disease, it's actually medicine. It's actually helping us to wake up. But encoded in this disease, it's actually medicine. It's actually helping us to wake up. But it's a quantum phenomenon. And what I mean by quantum, they can, like, with what is the nature, like, they can be like a wave or a particle, like with light. It can be both, and how it'll manifest depends on, well, how do we interact with it? How do we observe it? The same thing with this disease. And the Indigenous Native American people, they talk about, they have a name for it, Wetiko. They talk about it as being this cannibalistic spirit that just consumes and takes without giving anything back. And they have all these metaphors for it. It's like this parasite of the mind. It's this virus of the psyche. It's not just metaphor in the sense that we have, we understand in the physical realm that there are these viruses. And this is a psychic virus, and it operates through our unconscious, through the blind spots, in such a way that we then become the instrument to act this virus out in the world. So we act out our unconscious in a way, so we become the conduit through which this, you can think of it as a higher dimensional entity, but it's not actually, it doesn't even exist. You see, we might experience it subjectively as an entity. That's our experience of it, but like I point out in the book, it ultimately doesn't even have any intrinsic objective existence at all, separate from our mind. And yet, here's this thing that doesn't even exist whatsoever, and it can destroy our species. And that's the paradox. And the thing about this virus, it operates, like I was saying, through the unconscious blind spot in such a way that it works through the projective tendencies of our mind, because we're always projecting. That's one of the ways of describing when people, say, this is like a dream-like nature. Well, yeah, just like a dream is an ink blot, and whatever we project onto the ink blot, instantaneously, the ink blot shapeshifts and reflects back our projection, because it's not something separate out there. And it happens, in an instant. It doesn't even take a half of a second. It happens in no time, and then we become entranced by our own projections in such a way that we then think what we're perceiving objectively exists separate from us. So then we react to our projections. And that, in a sense, that's really the process underlying and informing the Wetiko virus. It's a form of like, because it operates through the blind spot, it's a form of like blindness, of psychic blindness, but it's a particular form of blindness in that we actually think we're really clearly seeing. And not only do we think we're clearly seeing, we actually, in an arrogant way, think that we're seeing more clearly than people who actually are clear-sighted. And so you know, what it does is that it's a source of madness in ourselves, but then the fact that everybody is suffering from it, we don't recognize our madness. We don't recognize our madness. We don't recognize our madness. It's an inner disease of the soul, and yet it explicates itself. It actually expresses itself via the medium of the outside world. So that's an amazing statement. And what I'm pointing at is that somehow there's something in the psyche that actually is able to extend itself out into the world and configure events in the seemingly outer world so as to synchronistically express what's going on inside of us. And that's always happening, but with most of us, we don't recognize that. And then, like I was saying, we become conditioned by our projections in a way we become entranced as if we're hypnotizing ourselves. And that's just a very simple description of how Wetiko works.
That it has the power to induce a negative hallucination. And, you know, many of us understand what a normal hallucination is, seeing something that isn't there. Can you help us understand this from the negative hallucination to really emphasize that?
Right, and that phrase, the negative hallucination, the sci-fi writer Philip K. Dick, he was the one who coined that phrase. And I just want to say, because I just wrote this recent article about Philip K. Dick's work, he was completely describing to a T Wetiko, but he of course was describing it in his own way. And so what he means by when we have like an actual hallucination, we're seeing something that's not there. Well, a negative hallucination is that something is there and we can't see it. And we can't see it. And we can't see it. You know, it works through the blind spot. It's like this blindness. You know, stuff is playing out that people who are actually seeing, oh, there's like this incredible shadow or there's abuse and it's really obvious. It might be obvious to you and me, but then there are other people who you point it out to, like say in a family system, if there's abuse. And or with Donald Trump being a perfect example. Oh, you point out, oh my God, he's so sexist and racist and misogynist and on and on and on. But then there are people who just don't see it. They just somehow cannot recognize what to you and I couldn't be more obvious, that would be an example of a negative hallucination.
Yeah, and this is part of what makes this, you know, phenomenon just really actually dangerous, because in an effort to perhaps awaken or help people step out of their own self-destruction, they're not only unable to see it, but they're also resistant to the efforts of others, perhaps, or any, you know, efforts of help or healing whatsoever. And, you know, speaking of resistance, something that I think we can bring up right at the start here, because it plays such a big role, is that while some people are deeply asleep and you know, that carries with it all sorts of things, but many are awakening, but in their awakening, they are trying to deal with the insanity of the world in ways that are actually not conducive, but actually fueling the Wetiko itself.
Because the thing about Wetiko, it actually will inspire us to act out in ways that don't serve us, that are actually, you know, contrary to our best interest. And so that's just really interesting. I just wanted to say that because I think we can all have the recognition that, oh, like when we're acting out our addictions or our habitual patterns, we know they're not serving us, but we do it anyway. So that would be an example of that. The thing about Wetiko, by operating through the blind spots, it operates through the part of us that actually reacts to our projection. So when we see Wetiko, say if we see the evil playing outside of ourselves, which, it's all around us, and if we react to it from an unconscious place with the best of intentions, with like this self-righteousness of, oh, I want to, I'm on the side of justice and I want to help and I want to bring world peace and I'm a political activist really wanting to, be compassionate. But if we're reacting out of our unconsciousness, we're actually unwittingly, even with the best of intentions, feeding Wetiko, because Wetiko, it feeds off of polarization. Okay. So that's why some of the best people I know, they're spiritually, very, very interested in spirituality. They're political activists with the best of intentions, but they're unwittingly serving as a vector to actually feed the disease that they're fighting against. And so that's one of the ways that Wetiko then, because it actually is contagious and it'll propagate itself in a non-local way through the field via people's unconscious reactions to it.
Deception on a personal and a collective scale that Wetiko carries. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, totally. Well, in other traditions, they'll have, they'll give these names to Wetiko, and they'll say, yeah, these are like a master of deception. That's what these entities are. So, because if you think about it, we ourselves are like these geniuses at deceiving ourselves. And one way of understanding that, because we all do it at certain points in our lives, but, we can tell a lie and we can start to believe our own lie to the point where we don't even know we're lying. And then we're in denial and we're in denial that we're in denial, and it becomes a feedback loop. And we can't see it, because if we see that we're doing that, it would blow our whole gig of being in denial. So then it becomes like an autonomous self-generating process of deceiving ourselves. And if I'm deceiving ourselves, and if I've told myself a lie and I believe my own lie, there's a certain charisma I have that's very convincing to other people. So that will easily entrance other people to like actually fall under my spell and to have an agreement with me. And you see, the thing about Wetiko, it can absolutely affect an individual person, but it's a mistake to just think of it as a pathology that, oh, that person has and I don't, or other people, we don't and they do, because it's a collective psychosis. And it's important to understand that the evil of Wetiko, it works through the collective process, through a group, through a species, through a nation. So that's the way that it will actually propagate itself. And so that's kind of why it's important. Yeah, any one of us at any moment can get taken over by it and can actually, in a sense, embody the disease. But if we see a person in that state, and if we think, oh, well, they have Wetiko and I don't, well, Wetiko, if you remember, I said it feeds off of polarization, it feeds off of separation. So the idea being, if you see somebody who's embodying Wetiko, if you have the understanding, oh, and they're a dream character. Dream character is in a dream. Any character in a dream is an aspect of ourselves. If they're a dream character, they're actually an embodied reflection of that sick part of me. Then all of a sudden you've cut through the separation and you're actually engendering compassion. And compassion is really the energy that really dispels Wetiko.